John Wayne was the face of frontier toughness, war pictures, swagger, and old Hollywood masculinity at its most uncompromising. But even a man like Wayne had a private idea of beauty, not the studio-manufactured kind, not just glamour under the right lighting, the kind of beauty that stopped him cold, the kind that held the screen without asking permission. Over the years, through interviews, co-stars, and rare comments, Wayne revealed the women who left a lasting impression on him. Some were elegant, some were fiery, some were untouchable, and one, above all, had the kind of presence that even John Wayne never forgot. That is what makes his choices so fascinating. Number 7. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly did not look like the kind of woman John Wayne should have admired most. On the surface, she belonged to a different universe entirely. Wayne was rough edges, open skies, cavalry dust, and barroom confidence. Grace Kelly was precision. She was restraint. She was the kind of beauty that seemed too perfect to belong to ordinary life. She moved with the calm of someone who had never needed to fight for attention because attention arrived before she ever spoke. That was part of what made her so powerful. Grace Kelly never looked as if she were trying to be beautiful. She looked as if beauty was simply the natural state of things around her. In a town full of actresses who strained to project glamour, Kelly gave the impression that glamour happened accidentally in her presence. It just followed her around like weather. Born in Philadelphia in 1929, she came from privilege, discipline, and social polish. But what made her unforgettable on screen was not just refinement. It was the way refinement hid steel. In films like Rear Window, Dial M for Murder, and To Catch a Thief, she did not merely appear elegant. She appeared composed in a way that made everyone around her seem slightly less controlled. There was always a quiet power beneath the gloves, the tailored dresses, the perfect posture. She was never ornamental. She was strategic. That is likely what would have appealed to Wayne. He was not impressed by women who only looked pretty from across the room. He respected command. He respected self-possession. And Grace Kelly had that in abundance. Her beauty was not warm in the obvious Hollywood way. It was cool, measured, almost remote. The kind of beauty that made men straighten their backs a little when she entered. There was also something about Grace Kelly that felt almost untouchable, and for a man like Wayne, that mattered. Hollywood was filled with women whose appeal was built around accessibility, around flirtation, around making men feel powerful. Grace Kelly did the opposite. She seemed to belong to a higher order of existence. Not cold, exactly. Just beyond reach. Like the camera was lucky to catch her at all. When she left Hollywood and became Princess of Monaco, it only confirmed what people already sensed. Grace Kelly had never fully belonged to the movie business. She seemed too polished, too self-contained, too naturally regal to remain simply another actress among many. Her life turned into myth because she had already looked mythical. Wayne, a man who understood screen myth better than almost anyone, would have recognized that instantly. What made Grace Kelly beautiful in his eyes was not voluptuousness, not playfulness, not overt sensuality. It was discipline made visible, class that did not need to announce itself. A woman so composed that the world around her looked noisier by comparison. And while Grace Kelly represented beauty at its most controlled, the next woman on this list represented something far less restrained. Number 6. Lana Turner. If Grace Kelly was the cool glow of elegance, Lana Turner was pure Hollywood heat. She was not simply beautiful. She was cinematic in the most classic golden age sense of the word. Platinum hair, sculpted face, luminous skin, and that unmistakable ability to look like a star before the camera even began rolling. Lana Turner did not become famous because she resembled a movie star. She became famous because she helped define what a movie star was supposed to look like. Born in 1921, Turner's rise was almost too perfectly Hollywood to be real. Discovered as a teenager, transformed by the studio system, and launched into fame with a look that seemed built for publicity, stills, magazine covers, and giant silver screens. She quickly became one of the defining glamour icons of her era. But what made her endure was not just the surface. It was the way she understood the mechanics of image and used them flawlessly. John Wayne would have admired that more than people assume. He was no intellectual snob about movie stardom. He understood better than most that Hollywood was a machine built on myth, projection, and force of personality. Lana Turner mastered that machine. She knew how to enter a frame. She knew how to hold it. She knew how to make beauty feel like an event. In films like The Postman, Always Rings Twice, There was something almost dangerous about the way she combined glamour with suggestion. She was polished, yes, but never dull. Her beauty had velocity. It moved, it provoked, it carried the promise of trouble beneath the satin and lipstick. That matters, because Wayne was not likely to be mesmerized by women who felt static. He respected women who had energy behind the image, women who could make the atmosphere shift. Lana Turner had that gift. She represented the full force of the studio era's dream factory, but she also hinted at something less innocent beneath it. The audience could admire her from a distance, but they also sensed the possibility of destruction in her orbit. That combination of glamour and danger is what kept her from ever becoming merely decorative. Her private life only intensified the image. The headlines, the relationships, the constant public fascination with what kind of life could possibly exist behind a face like that. Turner became one of those women whose beauty and personal mythology fused into something larger than either one alone. And Wayne, who understood the burden of public identity, would have recognized how much strength it took to carry that image year after year. What made Lana Turner beautiful to a man like John Wayne was that she looked like Hollywood itself at its most seductive. She did not just wear glamour, she radiated it. She turned the fantasy into flesh. But while Lana's beauty was inseparable from the machinery of stardom, the next woman on this list felt far more elemental. Number 5. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner did not seem polished into existence. She seemed born in a thunderstorm, where some stars looked carefully arranged. Ava looked almost too alive to be contained by the frame. There was a wildness to her beauty that made other women seem over-rehearsed. She was earthy, sensual, emotionally dangerous, and somehow still impossibly elegant in spite of it. That contradiction is what made her unforgettable. She could look like an aristocrat one moment and like pure trouble the next. Born in North Carolina in 1922, Ava Gardner carried something into Hollywood that the industry could never fully manufacture, a sense of raw, unprocessed force. The studio could dress her, light her, and market her, but it could not create what was already there. She had one of those faces that did not merely photograph well. It changed shape depending on mood, light, and angle, as if beauty itself had become unstable around her. That kind of face tends to haunt people. It does not sit still in the mind. John Wayne would almost certainly have responded to that. Instability. He liked strength, yes, but he also respected authenticity. And Ava Gardner never felt fake. However glamorous she became, she still projected the sense that she was her own creature, not a studio invention, not a compliant fantasy. A real woman with appetites, temper, pride, and enough self-awareness to know exactly what effect she was having. That is what separated Gardner from so many of her contemporaries. Her beauty did not ask permission. It did not flatter the viewer. It did not seem eager to be adored. It seemed slightly amused by the fact that people were staring in the first place. That amused distance made her even more magnetic. Men could admire her, desire her, even worship her. But there was always the feeling that Ava Gardner remained fundamentally unconquered. In films like The Killers, Mogambo, and The Barefoot, Contessa, she did not simply inhabit beauty. She weaponized it, not in a cold way, in a natural way, as if she understood that beauty, when combined with personality and unpredictability, becomes something more than attractiveness. It becomes leverage. Ava Gardner had that leverage in every room she entered. Her personal life, famously tempestuous, only deepened the legend. The affairs, the drinking, the emotional storms, the great public passions, the inability of ordinary domesticity to contain her. She became one of those women whose beauty seemed tied to a certain refusal to live quietly, and that refusal would have impressed Wayne, a man who did not admire passivity. What made Ava Gardner beautiful in his eyes was not just her face, though that would have been enough for most men. It was the fact that her beauty came attached to pulse, danger, and unpredictability. She did not seem ornamental, she seemed volcanic. And while Ava Gardner represented beauty at its most emotionally alive, the next woman offered something older, steadier, and more formidable. Number 4, Ingrid Bergman. If Ava Gardner burned, Ingrid Bergman endured. There are beautiful women whose appeal depends on timing, fashion, or youth. And then there are women whose faces seem to hold up under every kind of scrutiny. Different lighting, different decades, different emotional states. Ingrid Bergman belonged to that second category. She looked the same in every light, Because what made her beautiful was not cosmetic. It was structural, moral almost. There was weight behind her face, substance. A sense that beauty in her case was tied to character rather than surface. Born in Stockholm in 1915, Bergman brought to Hollywood something the American studios did not always know what to do with: sincerity that could not be faked. In a town increasingly obsessed with glamour as performance, Ingrid Bergman seemed determined to strip performance down until only truth remained. She was beautiful, unquestionably, but she never gave the impression of being interested in beauty for its own sake. That may be exactly why so many people found her so overwhelming. For John Wayne, that quality would have mattered deeply. He was not immune to glamour, but he respected directness. He respected conviction. He admired people who stood in their own skin without apology. Bergman did that. She had the courage to look natural in an unnatural town. The courage to let a face tell the story without hiding behind excess decoration. In an industry full of women terrified of being seen too clearly, Bergman's power came from letting herself be seen. That is what made performances like Casablanca, Notorious, and later Autumn Sonata so unforgettable. She did not simply appear on screen as a beautiful woman reciting dialogue. She gave the sense that a whole interior life existed behind every look. Pain, intelligence, dignity, longing, doubt. The audience was not just looking at her. They were reading her. And what they read was richer than the average movie star was willing to reveal. Her scandal with Roberto Rossellini only reinforced that impression. Hollywood punished her viciously for leaving one life and choosing another. Public moralists attacked her. The industry recoiled. Her image took the kind of beating that ended lesser careers. But Bergman survived it, and not by begging for forgiveness. She survived by continuing to work, continuing to live, and continuing to act at a level so high that the scandal eventually looked smaller than her talent. Wayne, who was not particularly sentimental about public judgment, would have admired that resilience. He knew that Hollywood loved to build idols, and just as quickly enjoyed watching them burn. Bergman refused to stay burned. She returned with her dignity intact. That kind of artistic survival carries its own beauty. What made Ingrid Bergman unforgettable was that she never seemed to be asking whether you found her beautiful. She already had more important things to do. She wanted truth. She wanted depth. She wanted emotional honesty. And the result was that her beauty felt inseparable from integrity. She did not merely look luminous. She looked trustworthy. In Hollywood, that may be rarer than perfection. But if Bergman's beauty came from sincerity and strength, the next woman on this list brought something far more immediate and combustible. Number 3, Maureen O'Hara. Maureen O'Hara was one of the few women in Hollywood who could stand beside John Wayne and never disappear. That alone made her extraordinary. Wayne was not an easy man to share the screen with. His size, his voice, his myth, his sheer dominance of frame and rhythm could make other actors seem smaller than they were. But Maureen O'Hara never seemed diminished by him. If anything, she sharpened him. She made him more interesting by giving him something powerful to play against. She did not lean on his legend. She met it head-on. Born in Dublin in 1920, O'Hara arrived with striking features, a commanding carriage, and that famous red hair that seemed to turn her into a blaze of colour in every Technicolor frame. But what made her beautiful was not just what the camera saw. It was what the audience felt. Backbone, wit, warmth, temper. She looked like a woman who could kiss you, insult you, and outlast you in the same afternoon. That was catnip for John Wayne. That was catnip for John Wayne. He admired women with force. Women who could fight back. Women who did not simply react to male energy, but generated their own. In films like Rio Grande, The Quiet Man, and McClintock, O'Hara brought exactly that. The chemistry between them worked because she never played weak. She played alive. She played proud. She played women who could love hard, argue hard, and demand respect without losing an ounce of femininity. That combination is harder to pull off than Hollywood often admits. Many actresses were either sold as soft and yielding or strong in ways that flattened their femininity. O'Hara was neither. She managed something rarer. She looked unmistakably feminine while radiating enough spirit to make even Wayne seem like he had met his equal. That equality is part of what made their on-screen pairing so beloved. Audiences were not just watching romance, they were watching too. Forces collide. Off-screen, Wayne's admiration for her was obvious in the way he kept returning to work with her. Men like Wayne did not repeatedly choose the same collaborator. unless something real was there: trust, respect, recognition. O'Hara had the kind of beauty that deepens once a man realizes it is attached to loyalty and character. She was not merely lovely to look at. She was solid, enduring, the sort of woman who could inhabit both glamour and hardship without seeming false in either setting. And that is crucial, because for Wayne, beauty without fortitude was never likely to rank highest. He came from a mythology of weather, war, and frontier endurance. He admired women who looked as though they could survive life, not just decorate it. Maureen O'Hara looked like that. Beautiful, yes, but also durable. Capable of passion without fragility, fire without chaos, grace without surrender. What made her beautiful in his eyes was the perfect union of face and spirit. She was not simply one more great beauty from old Hollywood. She was the kind of woman who could stand her ground against the Duke himself. And while O'Hara represented the ideal of fiery strength, the next woman on this list carried a beauty far more overtly sensual and commanding. Number 2, Sophia Loren. Sophia Loren did not enter a room. She took possession of it. That is the only way to describe a beauty like hers. Some women are admired from across a room. Sophia Loren changed the room itself. She had the kind of presence that made people reevaluate their surroundings the moment she appeared. Suddenly, the furniture looked flatter. The air looked thinner. Everyone else became background. Born in Rome in 1934, Loren emerged from wartime poverty to become one of the most formidable screen presences of the 20th century. And formidable is the right word. She was never a girl dressed up as a fantasy. She was a woman, entirely and unmistakably. There was nothing tentative about her beauty. It was mature, grounded, and fully aware of itself. That self-awareness is part of what made it so powerful. John Wayne would have respected that instantly. He was a man who valued certainty, and Sophia Loren projected certainty in every line of her body and every look in her eyes. She did not appear to be waiting for male approval. She looked like she had already judged the room and found most of it insufficient. For a man like Wayne, who had spent a lifetime around actresses trained to be accommodating, that kind of unapologetic self-possession would have stood out sharply. But Loren's beauty was not merely physical dominance. It was animated by intelligence, humor, and emotional command. She could be sensual without seeming easy, glamorous without seeming hollow, powerful without losing softness. That balance is extraordinarily rare. Many great beauties become trapped by one defining quality. Loren seemed to contain several at once. Earthiness and elegance, heat and wit, pride and tenderness. Her performances proved it. In films that demanded comedy, she could sparkle. In films that demanded pain, she could devastate. Her Oscar-winning work in Two Women showed that her beauty did not protect her from truth. She was willing to go where the role required, even when it stripped away every flattering surface. That willingness to be human, even when humanity looked exhausted or broken, made her beauty more complete rather than less. That is the test for men like Wayne. Can beauty survive reality? Can it survive age, hardship, sorrow, and scrutiny? With Sophia Loren, the answer was yes. In fact, it seemed to grow stronger. Some women look fragile under time. Loren looked richer, more finished, more impossible to dismiss. Her beauty matured the way great materials do. It did not deteriorate. It deepened, and perhaps that is why she belongs this high on the list. For John Wayne, beauty was never just about sweetness or youth. He admired women with force behind their femininity, women who looked fully formed, women who could dominate attention without ever appearing to chase it. Sophia Loren was that kind of woman. She was command made elegant. Yet even Sophia Loren, with all her power, all her confidence, all her unforgettable physical presence, could not take the top spot. Because for John Wayne, there was one woman whose beauty moved beyond force and entered the realm of myth. Number 1, Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was the most dangerous kind of beautiful because she made people forget where they were. That is what separates her from almost everyone else in Hollywood history. There have been prettier women, more elegant women, more sophisticated women, more technically accomplished actresses. But Marilyn Monroe had something that turns beauty into legend. She did not simply attract attention. She altered perception. Men lost their center around her. Women studied her. Cameras adored her. And the world, decades after her death, still behaves as though it never fully recovered from the shock of seeing her. For John Wayne, that kind of beauty would have been impossible to ignore. He belonged to a generation that saw Monroe not as distant cultural history, but as a living force moving through the same world. She was not yet an icon in a museum. She was present, audible, breathing, causing damage in real time. That is always more powerful than the polished memory that comes later. Born Norma Jean in 1926, Marilyn Monroe transformed herself from instability, insecurity, and anonymity into the most recognizable female face of the 20th century. But what made her so overwhelming was that the transformation never looked complete. You could always sense the person still flickering underneath the image. The vulnerability never disappeared. The longing never disappeared. The uncertainty remained visible through the glamour, and that gave her beauty a charge other women did not have. John Wayne, for all his toughness, understood the emotional mechanics of screen presence. He knew the camera often loves contradiction more than perfection, and Monroe's contradiction made flesh. Innocent and sensual, playful and tragic, soft and somehow indestructible at the exact same time. She looked as though she needed protecting, and yet seemed powerful enough to bring powerful men to their knees. That paradox is what made her unforgettable. In films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Some Like It Hot, and Bus Stop, she did not simply play beauty. She played the burden of being seen. She understood, more than critics gave her credit for, how to make the audience aware of desire while also revealing the loneliness beneath it. That is one reason her screen image remains so potent. It is not just sex appeal, it is exposed humanity under pressure. Wayne would have recognized that. He may have built his own legend on hardness, but he knew the value of emotional accessibility on screen. Monroe gave audiences something few stars were brave enough to give. The sense that the image might break at any moment. That fragility intensified everything. Her laugh, her walk, her smile, her famous breathy voice. It all felt thrilling because it also felt slightly unstable, as though beauty itself had become temporary and therefore unbearably precious. And that is the key. Marilyn Monroe did not represent beauty as control, like Grace Kelly. She did not represent beauty as command, like Sophia Loren. She did not represent beauty as strength, like Maureen O'Hara. She represented beauty as yearning, beauty as ache, beauty as something the whole world wanted to possess and could never quite hold on to. That kind of beauty stays with men, especially men who understand, however reluctantly, that all glamour is mortal. Her death froze her in cultural amber, but even without the tragedy, she likely would have remained unmatched in Wayne's eyes. Because Monroe did not merely look beautiful, she made beauty feel dangerous, fleeting, and intimate all at once. She made people aware of their own desire, their own projection, their own hunger. That is a deeper level of power than simple attractiveness can ever reach. And perhaps that is why she belongs at number one. Because for all John Wayne's admiration of strong women, elegant women, fiery women, and commanding women, Marilyn Monroe embodied the one quality no one else quite duplicated. She made beauty feel like a force of nature, uncontainable, irresistible, brief, the kind that leaves men staring long after the room has gone quiet. In the end, John Wayne's imagined pantheon of beauty tells us something revealing. He was not drawn only to softness, not only to glamour, not only to class. He admired women who had something behind the face, presence, character, voltage, a private center that could not be manufactured by any studio and could not be destroyed by a bad camera angle. Grace Kelly had it in her poise. Lana Turner had it in her stardom. Ava Gardner had it in her storm. Ingrid Bergman had it in her truth. Maureen O'Hara had it in her fire. Sophia Loren had it in her command. And Marilyn Monroe had it in that impossible combination of radiance and ruin that the world still cannot look away from. For a man like John Wayne, beauty was never just about looking perfect. It was about the woman who could stand in the middle of Hollywood's machinery and still feel larger than the machine. The woman whose beauty held under pressure. The woman whose presence lasted longer than the scene. The woman you remembered not because she asked you to, but because you had no choice. And that, more than anything, is what made these 7 unforgettable.